Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, and today we're going to be covering another Murder Minute video. Today's video for your trigger warning is going to contain the deaths of children. None of these are actually going to be that graphic. This is going to be covering an older serial killer. The details are not as graphic. However, we are going to be covering the deaths of several different people by different means. Some of the stories are more heinous, but they're also more fuzzy due to the time period and due to the fact that a lot of details are more tall tales now due to how old it is, and it's more of a legend now than an accurate accounting. So stay tuned and find out who I'll be covering today in my Murder Minute video. Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be covering a Murder Minute video on H.H. Holmes. So just a little bit about Murder Minute. Murder Minute is an app. I have an Android, so I know it's available on Androids. I'm not sure if it's available on Apple devices. So if you have an Apple device, just check your store. I know it's free on Androids. It does cover true crimes, serial killers. You can choose if you want to be in depth on the stories that it provides, or if you just want scant details. I like the in-depth stories because I want all of the story, not just a little bit. So today we're covering H.H. Holmes. So this story was provided by Mary Meisenzhal. Probably butchered that name, but that is the contributing author for today's story. So not going into the stuff that was contributed by the author herself, but H.H. Holmes is a bit of a legend, okay? I've read several things on H.H. Holmes over the years, and to tell you the truth, there are so many different stories about H.H. Holmes. You could probably read 5 different accounts and get 5 different stories. Now, some of the things that you do know are true. H.H. Holmes had a murder house. He killed different numbers of people, mostly women and children, in his murder house. He also did some killings in different areas. A lot of his crimes were either around his murder house or through insurance crimes, insurance scamming, if you will. And H.H. Holmes was a known bigamist. If you don't know what that is, bigamists are people that are married to multiple people at the same time. Not all of them living together like polygamist, but bigamist will marry one person here and marry another person here. The 2 women or men will not know about each other, and it's mostly done as a scamming type situation. But these are some of the basics that are known about H.H. Holmes. Another fun fact about H.H. Holmes is, if you are an American Horror Story fan like I am, season 4 was it, or maybe 5, whichever Hotel was, the character in Hotel was based off of H.H. Holmes. Actually, the hotel itself was based off of H.H. Holmes' murder hotel. The hidden passages, the windows opening to brick walls, the staircases leading to nothing, the hidden rooms, the death chambers, things of that nature. All of that was based off of H.H. Holmes' murder house. Now, let's get into the story itself. So, H.H. Holmes was born in New Hampshire in 1861. He's considered the United States' first serial killer. That's because of how much information we actually have on him. Could be different if we had more information on other people, but he is considered the first serial killer in the United States. And H.H. Holmes' actual name is Herman Webster Mudgett. And here is a picture of H.H. Holmes with his moniker and with his actual name. Okay, so Holmes actually had a fairly normal childhood in a respectable area with respectable parents. In this time frame, he actually kind of grew up in a relatively wealthy family. He was also fairly well educated. There are rumors, and some of them have kind of proven to be true in some aspects. Like I said, most of H.H. Holmes is more legend. There's not a whole lot that has been documented very well, but none of it can be accredited. But there are rumors that there was possible animal abuse and other early signs of serial killer tendencies, but again, nothing that can be verified, nothing that can be accredited, so do with that what you will. When Holmes was young, he did suffer from bullying. One such story was that two bullies tried to scare him by dragging him into a doctor's office. Back in that day, a lot of doctor's offices had the skeleton in the doctor's office, so they tried to scare him by that. And it actually had the opposite effect on Holmes. He actually credited that when he was older as the moment that he decided to study medicine, after he became fascinated with the skeleton in the doctor's office. So fast forward, 1978, Holmes was 17 years old and he married a girl by the name of Clara Lovering, and she was also 17. Holmes dropped out of the college in Vermont to study medicine at the University of Michigan. So this next slide is going to kind of show you what like a medical lab was in the 1800s. It's just this kind of sketch of what it would be like, and think of how modern medicine labs are like, gigantic differences. But this is kind of like the labs that Holmes would be participating in at that time. So here is what medical school was like in the 1800s. Now at this time, Holmes had Clara, his wife. They also had a child, a son, and both were with him in Michigan, but Holmes also started having various affairs. Clara was also starting to show signs of physical abuse, such as black eyes. Clara ended up leaving and moving back to New Hampshire before Holmes graduated, and there's really not much mentioned about her with Holmes after this. At the same time, Holmes started an insurance scheme while he was still in medical school. And here's the basics. Holmes would take out insurance plans on fictional people. He would then take cadavers from the medical school, disfigure them, and then claim that they were said fictional person that he had said insurance policy on, collect said insurance policy. Holmes did do a lot of moving around the country after he graduated from medical school. Strange incidences seem to follow him around everywhere he went. Take, for instance, he was in New York. There were rumors that Holmes killed a boy. Holmes was seen with this boy when he disappeared. Now, Holmes claimed that the boy returned home to Massachusetts after the boy was seen with him, but the boy was never seen again. So here's a slide of what the neighbors thought happened. By the way, just a sketch of what the neighbors thought had happened to the boy. Now, in that slide, it's a depiction of Holmes killing the little boy. Holmes denied any wrongdoing, but the police were never involved in it. However, Holmes did leave town after this incident, and Holmes continued his insurance fraud schemes. He also started selling fake medicine, such as in Philadelphia. Holmes was working at a pharmacy, and a boy died after purchasing fake medicine at a pharmacy that Holmes worked at. So here is like the building that, like a drawing of the building that Holmes worked in as a pharmacy person. I don't know what they called them back then. Like now we call them pharmacies and pharmacists and pharmacy techs. I don't know what they were called back then. But here's a sketch of said building. Once again, Holmes left town because he had another incident that was following him. After this, Holmes changed his name to Henry Howard Holmes, hence H.H. Holmes, to escape any connection to any of his previous crimes, and he moved to Chicago. Holmes' divorce from Clara was not finalized. However, he married a lady by the name of Myrtle Belknap. The two had a daughter, and in Chicago, Holmes found work at a drugstore. This is kind of a depiction of what drugstores at that time looked like. They were nowhere near what drugstores are now today. Most of the time, the pharmacist would have to make your medication, so there was all kinds of different compounds and liquids and powders, and they would have to mix things. So this is a depiction of what a pharmacy at that time looked like. So here in Chicago, Holmes eventually bought this pharmacy, but there's also a questioning type of situation around this pharmacy. Holmes started working at this pharmacy under the owner of the pharmacy, who was an older female. Some rumors started. The female who owned the pharmacy was there quite often, and then after Holmes hit town, people started seeing her less and less, and then all of a sudden, Holmes owned the pharmacy. It is a question, and she has been calculated as one of his victims, on whether Holmes killed her or not. And again, like I said, she has been calculated in that number of people that Holmes has killed, because no one ever saw her again. Moving on, young women came to Chicago from around the country and were eagerly accepting jobs from Holmes and other people in town. You have to think, back then, it was, even now Chicago is still like a major city, but back then it was where people would come and look for jobs. And at the same time, Holmes bought land around the pharmacy, but he was buying it in his wife's name, his new wife. Now, at the same time, he was still married to Clara, as he was married to Myrtle. Nobody knew this, so here comes his bigamy right there. But he was buying land in his wife's name to avoid creditors that he owed. And Holmes started making plans to add on to his pharmacy. So the first floor of his plans was the pharmacy itself, but the second floor was going to become apartments. Holmes designed the work that he wanted done. And this is where things start to get a little suspect. His designs were disturbing. Okay, so let's run down through some of Holmes' designs. They contained hidden compartments between two floors, staircases between floors only accessible through a trap door in the second story bathroom, windowless rooms and doors that open to brick walls, rooms that could only be opened from the outside. So here is a slide showing some of the kind of designs that Holmes had in mind. And you could pause to kind of look a little bit closer at them, but these are some sketches that Holmes had of his designs. Another thing that Holmes did was that he frequently changed contractors so that he was the only person that had a complete view of the design. The contractors never had a complete view of how the end result would be. Holmes would only allow them to see what they were working on at the time. And then he would fire that contractor and hire another contractor for the next phase of the building. Fire that contractor and get another contractor for the next phase. So Holmes was the only person that had a clear understanding of how the building was going to be when it was finished. Genius in a way, madman in another. Holmes referred to his building as the castle. And he still continued with his money-making schemes like the insurance fraud. He also continued with things like the fake medicine. But he also did things like hiding goods in hidden compartments of the property and saying that he had never gotten them so that he didn't have to pay for them. So he had several money-making schemes going on so that he could fund his lifestyle. Now, one way Holmes disposed of some of his victims was that he had a gigantic safe on the property. In that safe, one of the women that worked for him was locked inside. The safe was soundproof, so nobody could hear the person inside the safe screaming. When investigators finally looked at the castle, they opened the safe and there were fingernail marks inside the safe where the woman was trying to claw her way out because she was suffocating to death. But nobody ever knew she was in there. So, yeah, not a pleasant way to go. Holmes hired a young couple, a Ned and Julia Connor. The couple worked in the pharmacy on the first floor. They also lived in an apartment on the second floor. Julia soon engaged in an affair with Holmes, even though Ned, her husband, and Holmes' wife Myrtle were both living in apartments on the second floor. Ned soon packed and left after finding out what his wife was up to. Julia stayed and became part of Holmes' schemes. Holmes soon took out debts and started businesses in Julia's name. In 1891, Julia and her daughter Pearl disappeared. Holmes claimed that Julia had died from a botched abortion. Holmes never took responsibility for the death of Julia and Pearl, but it is widely accepted today that he murdered Julia. It is even thought that Julia is the woman that was locked in the safe. Around this time, Holmes started a new business. This business was a new glass bending business. This business would need a new furnace. That furnace was to be built in the basement. Now, no one ever saw Holmes bend any glass, but the furnace became useful. The furnace made young women disappear. Women were coming from all over to find work in the big city. When these women came to the town, they would stay in the boarding houses, such as Holmes's second floor apartments. There were always boarding houses around towns for women when they were coming into work. Holmes rented out apartments on his second floor for such purposes. These women usually did not have friends in Chicago and only limited interaction with their families back home, and that was usually through letters. You have to think of the time. Phones were not exactly like the big thing, and there definitely were no cell phones, internet, things of that nature. So all this made it easy for women to disappear. And it was also easy for the reports and things like that to just not be a thing, because they would disappear and there would be no one to make a report, because the families wouldn't think that, they had disappeared until much farther down the road. And then somebody at the boarding house could just be like, oh, well, they met a person, they're getting married, or, what have you. Or they told me they were headed back home. And that would move the report out of one jurisdiction and into another. And then with all of that, the person's still gone. So once the furnace was installed, disappearances increased around Holmes. Move into 1892, and Emerlyn Singrade came to Chicago looking for work. Here is Miss Singrade. Holmes would employ Singrade as a typist. Holmes explained, Holmes made her disappear by Christmas. Very rapid disappearance in that aspect as well. And Holmes simply explained away her absence by saying that she had left for Europe to be married. That became his fallback excuse for anyone that disappeared around him. Oh, she met somebody. They went off to get married. You know how it goes. Around this same time, Chicago started gearing up for the World's Fair. It was a big to-do. All eyes were on Chicago. It was big time. Holmes decided at this time to add a third story to his castle, and he started to get investors to put money into it because he planned on turning it into a hotel. But in 1893, Holmes set fire to his castle and claimed insurance money. At this point, the third floor was never completed. But he did this because people were starting to take note of how many women were coming up missing around Holmes. So this kept all the investigations off of Holmes's back, kept all of his crimes a secret, or so he thought. And Holmes took the insurance money and again was traveling the country. He met two young heiresses. They were sisters. One was named Minnie, the other named Nanny, their last name Williams. Within a few months, Holmes was married to Minnie Williams. This is Minnie Williams. Now let's take a second to stop and think. He's still married to his first wife. She went back home. She never got back around Holmes. She took her son with her. Second wife, Myrtle, they have a daughter together. He just set fire to the hotel. We don't know where Myrtle is and we don't know where his daughter is. But he's also still married to her technically. And now he's married to a third woman. Within a little bit of getting married to Minnie, he convinces her to transfer the deed to her Fort Worth property to a man named Alexander Bond. Who is Alexander Bond? Well, come to find out, Alexander Bond is H.H. Holmes. It's just one of his aliases. During this time, Holmes also teams up with another con artist. This person's name is Benjamin Pitzel. This is Pitzel. Holmes and Pitzel made plans to duplicate the Chicago building, Holmes's master plan, but with the Fort Worth property. However, Holmes never got a chance to do that. Minnie's sister came to visit, and the sisters wrote their aunt, stating that they were going to Europe with a friend. Neither sister was ever heard from again. Bond, Holmes, transferred the deed to a Benton T. Lyman. So the deed for the Fort Worth property was transferred to this Lyman character. Who was Lyman? Well, Lyman was an alias for Pitzel. Holmes even served as the notary for this deed transfer. The two took out thousands of dollars in mortgages and skipped town. They moved to St. Louis, bought a drugstore, and the couple started running scams again. Holmes ended up incarcerated in St. Louis for selling mortgaged goods. While in jail, Holmes met an outlaw and started explaining the insurance scam to this outlaw. So, the outlaw gave Holmes a name for a reputable attorney for the insurance scam to make it more of a scheme that could pass very easily for the insurance companies. The only thing that the outlaw asked was for $500. So Holmes paid the outlaw the $500. Holmes gets out of jail, and they put a scheme in place and start running it for one of Holmes's aliases. However, the insurance company becomes suspicious and refused to pay out. So Pitzel and Holmes skipped town and moved to Philadelphia. In Philadelphia, the duo planned the insurance scheme using one of Pitzel's life insurances. Pitzel was supposed to play the part of a B.F. Perry, an inventor who dies in a lab experiment gone wrong. However, at the last second, Pitzel gets cold feet, doesn't want to go through it. Holmes gets Pitzel drunk, gave him a dose of chloroform, and burned Pitzel to death, and then staged the scene. Pitzel's life insurance paid out $10,000, but to Pitzel's wife. So Holmes convinced Pitzel's wife that Pitzel owed him money. Holmes even offered to accompany 3 of Pitzel's children to an aunt's house in Indianapolis. Now this is where Holmes shows exactly how sick he can be. He's escorting 3 of Pitzel's children and has Pitzel's wife on another train running parallel to this aunt's house so that he can make sure that he gets his money. While on the trip, he finds out that he's wanted. And this is during the time when there are wanted posters like this up all over the place. So Holmes went on the run with the 3 children. He was in contact with Miss Pitzel because they're running parallel to each other. And he's telling Miss Pitzel that her husband's actually alive, but is in London, even though he knows that Pitzel's dead because he killed him. And Holmes changes his ID while he's on this trip. And the kids give a letter to Holmes to give to their mom, and he never even sends that. So they're in Denver at one point. And Miss Pitzel is literally 3 blocks away from her kids and doesn't know it. And Holmes decides that these kids are slowing him down. So he decides it's time for them to die. So he poisons the youngest with cyanide. And here are the remains that are found of that child. He then takes the 2 daughters and locks them in a trunk and drills a hole in it. He uses a hose in the hole, and he asphyxiates the girls and buries them in a basement of a rental home. And this is kind of a sketch of how that played out. It's not graphic in any way, but it's just kind of how people depicted him doing that to the girls. In Philadelphia, a detective found the girls and traced Holmes' trail from there. Holmes was arrested in Boston for the theft of a horse. Fast forward to 1895, Holmes was put on trial for the murder of Benjamin, found guilty, and was sentenced to death. Holmes then confessed to 27 murders and an additional 6 attempted murders. A Hearst newspaper paid $7,000. Now, one account says $7,000, another account says $75,000. Either way, if you factor it out to today's standards, it's anywhere between $30,000 and $35,000 in today's money. They paid that to Holmes for his confessions. So, here are some of the headlines that were ran in the paper. But here's the problem. One, Holmes couldn't tell the truth if the truth slapped him across the face. So some of the accounts have been found to be partially true. Some of the accounts have been completely fabricated. Some of the accounts are actually true. So, at the bare minimum, Holmes was an unreliable witness. Holmes was a con artist. At the time, just in Chicago alone, Holmes had 50 different lawsuits against him because people, contractors, different vendors, wanted money out of it. So you can't really believe a lot of the things that he said because he was trying to get paid to get other people off of his back. So researchers have not ever been able to put an actual number on how many people Holmes killed. The furnace covered up a lot of the deaths in the house. Him burning down that place covered up a lot of murders. Plus, Holmes had a tendency to travel, and you don't have any accountings of where he actually landed in places, so you don't actually know how many people he killed all across the country. So as it stands, he confessed to 27 murders. One account puts 9 bodies on him, one account puts 10 bodies on him, one account puts 6 bodies on him. Nobody ever really knows how many bodies to put on H.H. Holmes. But in 1886, at the Philadelphia County Prison, Holmes was hung. So we do know that the legend of Holmes ended in 1896. So, that's going to end today's Murder Minute video. If you like this story, you can give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe. Ring that bell that's next to the subscription button. And in the comment section down below, let me know, have you read anything on H.H. Holmes? How many bodies did they put on him in that story? And in the description box down below is my Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, also my email. If you have anybody that you want me to cover, go ahead and leave that on any of those platforms. You can also put it in the comment section, wherever you see fit. I have a very interesting true crime video coming up from Murder Minute in another week. And it actually shocked me, which is surprising. Most things don't. But anyway, guys, that's going to do it for today's video, and I will see you on the next one. Bye for now.